only. It's not legal, financial, or tax advice. Everyone's situation is different, so be sure to talk to a qualified professional before making decisions about retirement or estate planning. The views shared here are those of our guests and hosts, and not necessarily those of the Detroit Central High School class of 1985 reunion committee. Tracy.
All, all right, now I am Tracy Foster, known as Tracy Hill, and this is Centrally Speaking. And today's topic is going to be about retirement and estate planning. So today we have as my co-host Sophia Campbell, class of 1985. Welcome, Sophia.
Thank you for having me, Tracy.
All right. So let's get into our discussion, our panel that we have here today. And we have Lenore Grantham, who is the sole proprietor of the law offices of Lenore Grantham. Welcome to Centrally Speaking.
Thank you, Tracy and Sophia. Thank you for having me today.
All
Thank you.
right. Now we also have Maurice Miller Jr., who is the managing partner of the Miller's Wealth Management LLC. Welcome to the show, Maurice.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation with you all today.
All right. Now, this conversation or discussion that we're going to have is really important to not only the class of 1985, but for anyone who is arriving at the age where they want to, or they may be considering and thinking about retirement and estate planning and all the things that go into it. And so I would like to start off by asking Lenore, can you tell us a little something about estate planning and who is estate planning really for?
Sure. Thanks, Tracy, for that. And that's an excellent question. Estate planning is for everyone, actually, if you're of legal age. But obviously, we think about it more when we get to the ages that we are on this panel, right? Mid-50s, where we're thinking about our own retirement and making sure our affairs are in order. Sometimes we're helping our parents get their affairs in order, and maybe even grandparents, as we were talking before the show. So estate planning is important for those reasons. It basically it allows you, the individual, to determine, where your assets go when you die. And probably more importantly, and people don't always think about this, it also allows you to determine who handles your affairs should you become incapacitated. And that is financial and medically speaking. So those are two greatest reasons for estate planning. And you don't have to be wealthy to have an estate plan. You just have to be prudent and want to make sure that your loved ones are taken care of and handle your affairs after you're gone, or should you become incapacitated, with the greatest of ease. So,
I was thinking about this topic as I was doing a little research about it. And, a lot of people are very kind of, they really don't want to talk about situations such as the end of life. And, they don't really want to talk about trust and living wills. And so how do you approach this subject with your parents or your grandparents at this point? Or even how do you approach this subject with your mate if you're married, or your children? How do you go about doing this?
Yeah, another great question, Tracy. No, none of us wants to talk about our demise, right? We want to be here forever. But it's the responsible thing to do, right? So many times people die and your family members, your loved ones are scrambling. What did mom have? What did dad have? Where are the important papers? Who do I call? Who do I talk to? So, you can start if you're the person who is in need of the estate plan, and you start thinking about that for yourself. You start having that conversation with your spouse. You need to have that conversation with your children and just letting them know. And a lot of kids will be kind of standoffish. Mom or dad, I don't want to talk about you dying, but these are things that are just important. They're a part of life. Dying is a part of life, as we all know. And you just have to sit them down and say, hey, I want you guys to be prepared. When I die, or if I become incapacitated. And so many times, especially in our community, we're caught off guard, and we're caught basically, mom or dad dies. And again, we're scrambling, or we wait until it's too late. Mom and dad are in a nursing home, and dementia is setting in. And now, because there was nothing done, they didn't write down what they wanted. Now we got to beat down the doors of the probate court and be tied up in court, spending money and fighting over who's going to make the decisions, when mom or dad could have told you who they wanted to make those decisions. So it's just a matter of sitting them down and explaining it in that way, that this is to make it easy for you when I'm gone, or should I become incapacitated. And then you just kind of go from there.
I do. I really, this is a really great conversation, a discussion for us to have, because I know so many of us have aging parents, or in my case, I have aging parents and aging grandparents. And one of the conversations that I'm having right now is talking to my grandmother, making sure she has an estate, a plan, because, I would not want for her to make that transition, and the house, even though we say, oh, the house goes to, Francine or Tracy, but if we don't have an estate plan, then the house is not necessarily going to go to my mother or me. It's going to go to court, and that's more money.
Exactly. And again, and that leads back to just, not knowing, you can verbally say a lot of things, or people will jot down some things. And again, I'm speaking from the state of Michigan when I talk about the law and statutes. But there's a specific law for what is an actual will, right? And what consists of a valid legal will. So having something written down on paper may or may not be able to be brought into the courts as a holographic will, of sorts, when you just write it out yourself. And there's even requirements for that. So again, it's scary. We think about cost, and oh gosh, this costs so much. But I kind of jokingly say this to clients who are a little weary. I say, either you're going to pay an attorney up front, or you're going to pay more on the back end. Either way, you have to get these things done, because what we don't know can hurt us, right? If you don't know that, your house will have to be probated when you die, if you're single and it's not a marital situation where the deed is in a certain way as a married couple, that, like you said, that's going into probate, right? And then creditors, things like that could come and eat that up. So there's things that you can protect yourself from, but you have to be willing and able to have that conversation with the legal professional to tell you what you don't know. And if you don't have anything in place, the state of Michigan has something in place for you, and it's called the statute, and it's going to transfer per the statute.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what I don't want.
And if
That's
I
not what we
may,
want.
and if I
Please,
may
please.
add, because our firm does a lot with financial planning, we often work in very much tandem with people like Lenore. And one of the things that I try to help clients understand around estate planning is that it's really about maintaining that generational wealth that we often talk about.
Yeah.
And one of the
This is
ways that we
true.
can maintain that generational wealth is through proper estate planning. And I often talk to clients about control. Do you want the state of Michigan in control, or do you want to be in control? And the last thing that I really help clients to think about estate planning is really some of the positive things that we all see come out of good estate planning, and just the flexibility it allows you while you're alive. My wife and I, when we went through our estate planning, we did everything. And I recall buying a vehicle for my car, or buying a vehicle for my wife, and we have 5 children. And my wife did not have time to sit in the dealership with 4 children running around. Well, because I had power of attorney, I actually went into the dealership, signed the papers for her, and all she had to do was pick up the keys and walk out with the car. So there's a lot of positivity that comes out of having a good estate plan.
Okay.
I really like that you said that about, that is really a really key thing to know. But a lot of us, especially as Black people, I have to say it, we're not what I would say, fiscally aware. So it really does get to a point where some our loved one dies or finds themselves in a situation where they're incapacitated, and then these conversations happen about, oh, well, who has the power of attorney? Who is going to be able to make those decisions, possibly those end of life decisions that need to be made? And I find that, we don't want to talk about it. We really don't want to talk about it. We really don't want to bring it up to our family members, because maybe, when you start talking about power of attorney, it's about control. Who is going to control grandma's assets? Who is going to control dad's social security? All of those things start coming up. How can we navigate and become more fiscally aware, so that we can be able to handle our family's affairs and be able to pass down generational wealth from our children to our grandchildren?
And
Either one, Lenore,
sure.
I'm sorry.
Sure. Tracy, that's an excellent point. Control is a key word, right? Either as the donor, or the person that's doing the will, or the making their own estate plan, you don't want to give up control. Or as the children or the grandchildren, you're fighting over who's going to have control, because you think that it's a glorious job. Let's be clear, it is not. Being the personal representative of an estate is work. Being the trustee of a trust is work. Being a guardian of an incapacitated individual is work. Being the financial conservator and making sure all the bills are paid and the money is accounted for, that's work. So we because we don't know, we do a lot of things that, one, we withhold or we don't do it, or two, we think we know more than we do know, and then we get into fights and things, when you can just simply ask and go get professional advice and go to different seminars and different things that are offered all over cities and communities and towns to help you with that. So giving up that control is hard when you've been independent your whole life. But what you don't want to do is wait too late. I've gone to the hospital and had documents signed by people who passed a couple of days later. You don't want to wait until you're at that point. As long as you still have capacity, you can make that decision, and capacity has its elements and things we have to make sure you can do. And you can still be in control of who you want to, serve as your personal representative of your estate, or trustee of your trust, or guardian or conservator. But as soon as you are incapacitated, we got to go to court now. It's too late for mom to sign a document. It's too late for dad to sign a document. And we think because we're the child, or we're even the spouse, that these third parties are going to talk to us. They are not. HRs and pension funds and credit card, they're not going to talk to you because you're his wife or because you're the husband. They're not going to do it. They're going to need that person there, or they're going to need legal papers. So we do have to give up the control and allow our family members to help us, and also just start talking about it and telling them things. And once you make that decision, another part of it that we're not talking about is fear. If you're a parent that has multiple children, you don't want your children fighting. I don't want them fighting over my stuff. I don't want to hurt, Johnny's feelings, because I really think Sue is more suited. All of that has to go out the window, mom and dad. You make the decision, and that's that. Or else it's going to be a mess. It's going to be a mess, and they're gonna end up back in my office anyway. So so many areas to estate planning, and just what we need to do as a people, and as our generation, again, whether it's for us or whether it's for our parents or our grandparents. And Reese brought up an excellent point about powers of attorney. It's just so many misconceptions and things people don't know. That agent has the authority to act while you're living. You don't have to be incapacitated for your financial power of attorney or your agent to act on your behalf. So there's things that we can just educate ourselves on and get information, but a lot of it is we don't want to let go of that control yet, and it's it's just in us because that's all we've ever done is, and we worked hard for what we have, and we don't want to see somebody, mess over, for lack of a better term, our stuff.
Right, Lenore. So
Education.
how would you go about how do you start something like that? Do people just Google estate planning, and how do you know who to
You know
go
what?
with? How do you make that decision?
It's a
And
good
the
question.
cost.
It's a good question. A lot of people call me on word of mouth recommendation. A lot of people call when they've seen a friend or a cousin or someone relative go through the horrors of not having an estate plan. My sister went through it when her husband died, or my cousin went through it, or my best girlfriend's mom died, and I want to make sure my family doesn't have to fight. So sometimes people see other people's situation and then they come running. Sometimes, again, people, it's word of mouth, or, I present it on different platforms. People hear about me. You can go through your state bar and you can look up estate planning attorneys. You can do it by zip code, by county, by city, at least for the state of Michigan. You want to talk to that person and get a feel of them and see if they're a good person and fit for you. But it's many ways to get in contact with, an estate planning attorney. But the state bar is the perfect way if you don't know anybody. But again, like Marie said, in our circle, financial planners, we run in, hand in hand. So he can usually recommend a estate planning attorney. I can usually recommend an accountant or a financial planner, or a realtor, because another part of estate planning is real property, right? That house or that land. So all of that falls into it, right? So it's many ways to get in contact with us. So,
And when we talk about costs, what are we talking about?
Cost range, it depends on the lawyer. The industry is kind of, we kind of stay consistent across our industry. An estate plan, some people charge a flat fee depending on what you're doing. It all depends on your assets, how much you own or have based on the amount of work that'll have to be done. You can do a flat fee will, and power of attorneys. It can range anywhere from, $1,000 to $4,000, just depending on what you're doing and what, a trust is always going to cost more because there's so many facets of a trust and different things that goes into that. But an estate plan, the documents typically consist of a will, a durable power of attorney financial, a patient advocate designation, which is the medical power of attorney, and or a trust. Now, whether or not you need a trust is based on your individual needs. But at minimum, a will and the two powers of attorney constitute a complete estate plan. And you can throw in a deed if you want to, do a ladybird deed or something like that. And that's kind of the equivalent of naming a beneficiary for your house. But those are the things that, those are the documents that constitute an estate plan. And if you have those things done, then you don't have that fear of having to go to court to have someone appointed on your behalf.
Right.
So that's in probate court getting a conservator and a guardian once you no longer have the ability to say who you want to play that role when it comes to your estate. So,
well, you brought ladybird deed. Can you expound on that?
Sure. So a ladybird deed, that's the common name for it, but the technical name is enhanced life estate. So what that is that you have your deed to your house, which is most common, right? And when you have a deed, if you add a person's name to your deed, you have effectively given away 50% of your property. Okay. And you cannot go back and then say, nope, I don't want Johnny to have it. I want Marie to have it. No, if you add somebody's name to your deed, now they are owner to your house. Okay. Johnny has to quit claim it back to you and be willing to do that if you want him off. There's no such thing as going down to the Wayne County or any county recorder, register of deeds and saying, I want to take somebody's off, unless you have a ladybird deed. And that deed allows you to retain a life estate in your property, and actually an enhanced life estate, which allows you to still sell it, to encumber it with a loan, take out a loan against it. It actually allows you to change a named remainderman of your property, as long as you're living, and that's the best way to make sure your property doesn't have to go through probate. So when you do that, as soon as you die, that property just flows to the named remainderman or remaindermen, and it is no longer in your deceased estate, which means it doesn't have to go through probate. That named individual only now has to take that death certificate to that recorder's office and record it, and that property now belongs to that named individual or individuals. But it is, if there's a lease, if there's a mortgage on it, it is still subject to that mortgage, but it doesn't go through probate court and is now not subject to the normal process of probating, meaning, creditors and such, all of that. It just flows to that person. So that's what a ladybird deed does, as opposed to just, I'm going to add my child's name or somebody's name to my deed, and when I die, they get it. But if you don't name it right based on how you own it, that's a deeper story, tenants in common or joint tenants with right of survivorship. But that's the purpose of a ladybird deed, and there's some pros and cons to it, but it's a very common way of making sure that house never has to go through probate court.
Excellent information. I wanted to ask Tracy, if you will, if I can ask Mr. Miller a question about being a financial advisor, some of the things you do, Mr. Miller.
Sure.
So one question in particular, with us facing retirement, what do we need to do? Like, what's the first thing we need to do right now?
I think the first thing that we need to do right now is understand that retirement is going to come one day, and that retirement is really what you make it. The thing that I love most about helping clients with retirement planning is this is the one time where I see adults dreaming again. We've all had dreams in our life. Some of them were achieved, and then sometimes life punches us in the face and kind of takes us off path. But when we talk to clients about retirement planning, we see them really thinking about, okay, what does this next stage in life look like?
Yeah.
So as we start to think about retirement, you really want to take almost a canvas, as if you were painting a picture, and really start to think about, what does that look like? Ideally, even if you think something is outside of your reach, what do you want retirement to look like? For some people, they want to say, I don't want to have to go to work anymore and do whatever I want. For some people, they still want to work. They just want to determine what time they get up to go to work, how much work they do, and what they have available through that work. So retirement is a phase that's going to come whether you're prepared or not. And the best thing you can do is start to develop a plan around that, so that you don't have surprises, and so that you can actually live with purpose and on purpose. There's this thought that says you either live by design or live by default. And too many people are living by default. And when we don't properly plan for retirement, then we end up on the government's plan, where they're making the decisions about our retirement versus, again, us being in control.
Right.
This is so true. What about for a lot of people, when we think about retirement, we think about 401ks, we think about different accounts that we may have right now to be that cushion for us. But right now, it appears that with the Trump administration and Social Security, it used to be a safety net for a lot of us, but it may not be that way in the incoming future. What can we do right now? Let's say, I lost a lot of money in my 401k these past few weeks, okay? And it's not the way it was last year, okay? Let's say I lost a lot of money in the stock market as too. Target stocks have plummeted. So what can I do right now to make my financial situation a little bit better for retirement? I'm asking not just for everyone else, I'm asking for myself.
Yes,
And
yes,
me too.
yes, yes. So let's talk about Social Security.
Okay.
So while there will likely be changes with Social Security, I don't see it going away as everybody thinks. There will be a massive revolt in this country that I don't think anybody would ever be prepared for to deal with if Social Security wasn't there.
Hmm.
Now, some of the changes that we'll probably see with Social Security is that they'll likely continue to increase ages, which is what happened, which has been happening for decades. Before it was 62, then the full retirement it changed to 65, then it's 66, then it's 67. And this is where we don't want to be on the government's plan.
Right.
Now, if you were to look at a social security statement, it tells you this should not be your only source of income.
Yes, it does.
So, social
Hmm.
security has never meant to be our sole source. So, as we think about planning for retirement, we really want to start to look at retirement planning like climbing a mountain. And there's two phases of climbing a mountain, going up and coming back down. Now, I'm not a mountain climber. I'm not an expert in climbing a mountain, but I'm going somewhere with this.
Okay.
From what I have learned about climbing a mountain, more injuries and death happen on the way down than actually on the way up, which indicates the things you do to get up that mountain are not the same as what you do to get back down. And the same is true for retirement planning. So while you are still working, you are in the accumulation phase. You're trying to grow your money as quick as you can, as fast as you can, as much as you can. But when you get to retirement, the goal is not to sit up on top of that mountain. You got to come back down. So how do you then turn this pot of money into income streams? And
Hmm.
that's really the goal around retirement is income. What is Social Security? Income. So how do we replace our income? And that's what real planning around retirement is. Whether you have a pension, Social Security, your 401k, when you talk about the ups and downs of the market, the stock market is up more than it's down. Typically, in a decade span, you're probably going to have 7 to 8 positive years and a couple negative years. So, the biggest thing that you can do for yourself is to say, if I have, let's call it 5 years out from retirement, I should be able to recover. Now, as you get closer to retirement, you want to make sure that you start to position money in a way that you can get income from it on a consistent basis. That way, to your point, Tracy, if the market is going down, as long as you have that mailbox money coming in, you're not going to care as much.
So
And
when
here,
you say, excuse me, I want to interject real quick.
sure.
So when you say income, what you saying? Are you saying residual income? Are you saying that we need to invest in maybe property or something like that to make sure we're having income coming in every month if we're retired or if we have retired?
It could be any of those things. There's several investments that can generate income. We know the main things are things like your pension, any 401k can be turned into an annuity to get income. You can have real estate properties that generate income. There are stock and bond portfolios that will generate income on a monthly basis that you can live off of. So the key is to diversify your assets and really understand as you prepare for retirement how much money are you actually going to need on a monthly basis? And then where can I go to get that money from? And if it's coming from multiple sources, even if we're dealing in a situation where the market is going up and down, typically certain assets are going to perform differently than other assets at different times. So it should balance each other out. But I want to speak to one thing real quick about everybody's concern about the current president and our administration. And I want to give you a statistic. Before President Trump got back into office, prior to that, there were about 14 administrations going back to the Great Depression. 7 were Republican, 7 were Democratic. So it was even, half and half. And over those 14 administrations, we had 14 recessions. So my point is that in the long run, it really doesn't matter that much who's in office. We have more control over what our retirement looks like based on the decisions we make versus being overly concerned about who's in office. Don't get me wrong. I get everybody's concern, but at the end of the day, I've been fortunate to be in this business now 20 years. Yes, I did start when I was 2. And never once has anybody come to my office, and I'm sure Lenore would agree, and say, I couldn't retire because Jimmy Carter was in office, or Bill Clinton was in office, or George Bush, or Barack Obama. What they said is that I probably didn't save enough.
Well, Maurice, what if I am in a situation where I wasn't able to save for my future? I wasn't able to really, invest. I wasn't really able to get my 401k situation up and popping. I wasn't able to do any of those things. What can I do right now? I'm 50, something years of age, and I see retirement stare me right in the face. I see 65, of course, but what can I do? What can I do right now to prepare for that? I know it's getting late, but is there anything that I can do?
Start. That's what you can do. If you can fog up a mirror, you can do something. And if you think about the world of investments, if you take something basic like a mutual fund, which is a collection of a bunch of different investments in one, you can typically start a mutual fund for $250. And once you have that mutual fund's initial purchase, you can put $50 a month in, so you can do something. The other side of that as well is that maybe you might want to reconsider your professional career. There are certain places that will still help provide things like pensions. You might have to work there for 10 years or so. So maybe that's another way to supplement retirement. So there's a lot of things we can do, but the biggest thing is just really doing something.
We need to get started.
Absolutely.
Like you said, we need to get started. I would like to know, we talked a little bit about the Lady Bird deed, Lenore, and what are the pros and the cons of the Lady Bird deed?
Good question, Tracy. And like I said earlier, when I kind of delve into that topic, the Lady Bird deed, the biggest pro is that when you die, that's not a part of your deceased estate. It goes, the house now goes to who you named as the remainder of that estate, of that real property. So that is the biggest pro, right? It because if it has to go to your deceased estate, there's things that it has to be probated. It could possibly, if depending on your creditors and how much debt you have when you die. Another maybe misconception, debt doesn't necessarily go away when you die. If there's assets in the estate, creditors can reach in and say, pay me, right? And family members may not get anything if the creditors, want to go after what that decedent owed. In that house, if it's not a spousal situation, can be up for grabs in that situation. So if it never flows into the estate, it's never up for grabs, right? It automatically goes to that to that named remainder man. One of the cons, and it's a slight con, people may not realize this, but whenever you buy a house, whenever you mortgage a house, in that paperwork somewhere, there's a due on sale clause, right? So as you know, if you buy a house, you have a mortgage on it, you go to sell it, that mortgage holder gets paid first and you get what's left, right? That lien holder gets paid first. So changing changing the name on the deed, in the state of Michigan, it's a title holder state. So when we get a mortgage, we hold our own deed. The mortgage company doesn't keep it in a vault, right? So the mortgage company has a little clause in that paperwork that says due on sale. And sale doesn't necessarily mean when I sell it. It means if that deed changes names, you need to pay me my money, right? So they can call that mortgage or that lien due if that title changes names. I shouldn't say most. In my experience and what I've found is that the mortgage, as long as you're paying that mortgage, they don't care that much. They don't care that much to spend the kind of money to get their lawyers involved to try to go after you and make you pay it. And they know people don't have it, right? If I still owe 80 grand on my house and I do a ladybird deed to my 2 children or my 3 children, one of my kids gonna be mad. They're as long as they keep paying that mortgage, the mortgage company is okay, whatever. Because they're still the first lien holder and they still have all of their legal ramifications, or I'm sorry, legal remedies at their disposal as if you didn't do anything with that deed, because they're in privy with that owner. So the most that I see happen, if you do decide, okay, I'm going to do a ladybird deed, I'm going to, in my case, I'm going to leave it to my 3 kids as joint tenants with right of survivorship. And then I say, I want to take out a second mortgage or a line of credit or anything like that. They will make me take it out of ladybird status. So I would then have to redeed it back to just me, do the whatever I'm going to do with that finance company. And then after some time pass and they're not looking anymore, I'm going to go turn it back into a ladybird deed. So that's the most that I've seen happen, is that lien holder, if you try to do any other, reach into the funds or any cash of that house and you want to refinance it or take out a line of credit, they're going to make you flip it out of that ladybird deed back to just yourself. Because remember, I told you that's the one time you can actually just change the names, because I didn't give it to my kids yet. They only get it when I die, right? So I am still in full control of it. And they're going to say, you got to take it out of ladybird deed status before I'm going to let you, refinance it. So, but again, as long as they're getting paid, they don't necessarily call it due, but they can. It's not to say they can't. When you get to messing with that deed, in your clause somewhere in that mortgage, there is a due on sale clause. And then whenever that deed starts moving or changing names, and they do have a department that kind of monitors that, whether we think they're looking or not, they are. So that's the one con to that ladybird deed.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I had a question. Yes. So how do we set our children, young and old, to be financially literate and stable?
I'm going to let Maurice tackle that question. I have some thoughts, but that's his area. So
I appreciate it, and I'm sure it's going to all go down the same place. I think really the key is communication. I think a lot of times when it comes to our children, we don't want to admit to maybe mistakes that we've made, but a lot of times helping them understand, here are some of the things that I did, right? Sharing our failures financially, but also sharing our successes. Here's what I've been able to do that has worked out really well. And so I think we as a community need to do a better job of just frankly sharing information, having family meetings about finances, sitting down with your children and teaching them, here's what a stock is. Here's what investments are. My wife and I, one of the things we did is we opened up an investment account for all 5 of our kids, and we made them all pick a stock. We didn't care what it was, but we wanted them to see firsthand, here's what investing looks like. And so by doing that, they have ownership, and now things are starting to click. Now they're asking for less money to waste on things and more money to say, how can I grow it? So, when we are doing things like family reunions, we need to set some time aside at those family reunions to talk about, is everybody together for their estate plan? Does everybody have life insurance? Is everybody planning for retirement? So I really think it really starts with just sitting down and having continuous family meetings and being open and honest. Like my children, my oldest is 12 years old. Yes. And some people think it's crazy to me, but my kids know how much money I make, because I want them to understand, here's what this means. There's a
Mhm.
responsibility with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And if I may, I would like just to piggyback on that. I agree wholeheartedly, and I also agree. The younger we start with them, like, okay, some listeners might be thinking, or some viewers might be thinking, okay, well, Maurice, that's his profession, so of course that's what he would think. I didn't think that, but just the small things. If you're giving your kids allowance, just teaching them, okay, you could do this, or you could do that, or here's so much that if it starts young. I mean, and a lot of us grew up in the church, and we know about tithing or 10%, but if you can do that for the church, you need to pay yourself, right? When you get this money, you need to start divvying up. Okay, this is if you're in the church, that's what you believe. This is what I'm giving God. This is what I'm giving myself, and
Right.
then this is what I have left to spend, right? And
Mhm.
if we just start teaching our kids that from a young age, and a lot of times when we're younger and we're just so busy getting our grind on, and we're not thinking about it, or it wasn't taught to us,
Right.
and we're just in the struggle. But
Mhm.
it's a new day. We're smarter. Our kids are smarter. We have more generations in our family that are college educated, and it's just time that we start talking about those things. Do you need I don't want to get into some of the stuff we say. I don't want to offend anybody, but do you need this $180 braids, or do you need to save some of this money when you get paid? So it's just teaching our kids, and like Marie said, it's okay to say, okay, these are the household bills. Okay,
Mhm.
one child, how would you, this is how much mommy and daddy made. How would you pay all these bills, and what would you save, and what would you have left? Start making that the game sometimes,
Mhm.
and we
Mhm.
just have to start somewhere and talk to our kids about it.
And I like the fact that, I'm sorry, Sophia. I like the fact that Marie said about the importance of us being open and honest and actually having those conversations and not being afraid to bring that up. Because, we were going, well, when I was growing up, I'll just put myself in there. My family, we would talk about financial matters, but actually it was only a discussion between the grown-ups and not the children. Even if we as children, we're in our 30s and 40s, there's still certain things financially that we were not privy to because we were told it's none of our business.
Right.
And so what I found that when my husband was diagnosed with cancer, between us, we had to sit down and have that conversation about our finances and about estate planning. But then we also had that conversation with our children, our adult children, because we wanted them to know what was happening, what was going on, how they would fit into the situation should the inevitable happen. And I just think that it's really important that we get this message out here so that we as Black people, we can understand that financial planning, estate planning, all of these things are not relegated to just people who are wealthy, to the Elon Musk of the world, the Trumps of the world. It's us too. It's us too, because it's really about generational wealth and being financially or fiscally responsible for our future and for our generations to come.
Yeah, yeah. And if I can add really quickly, we mentioned it a couple of times. You've said it, Tracy. You've said it, Maurice. Our generational wealth, and a lot of times in our families, our biggest asset is our house. Right? That's the
That's
thing
right.
we work the hardest
Mhm.
for. That's the thing we own. That's worth the most. And if we can't take the time to do a will or do a ladybird duty to protect that house, and I'll just talk about my city, our city that we love, Detroit, right? The blight and the things that we've overcome and we've gotten through, but a lot of that simply came from grandma dying, and now your grandchild is living in that house and not realizing that I got to pay the taxes on this, I got to do the upkeep on this, and they're just living off of mama or grandmama's house and not really doing anything or putting anything back into it, and then it gets taken by taxes. And I know our city assessor and our executive, they're working saying, hey, if you tell us that you've opened probate for your estate, we can pause those taxes for a little bit and let you handle that business. But again, that generational wealth, even if you're not super wealthy, a lot of times I've done so many estate plans and administered so many probate estates. It's that house that's giving that wealth off, right? That's the
Mhm.
biggest asset a lot of people's estate, those that may not have the stocks and the bond. Your house is worth a lot. If you worked years and paid it off, That's your biggest asset. And if you don't take the
Right.
time, it's going to the city for taxes or the county because the taxes
Mhm.
were paid when it didn't have to be.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So just naming somebody and letting them know that, hey, this house is our worth right now. This is what we have. And if you have to sell it, at least now it's being, it's your estate. It's your wealth. That's what you have to pass down. And we need to take care of that.
And if I can add to that, I think the key is what Lenore is saying, and Tracy, what you already said, is that all of these tools and items are for us. All of these things we have the ability to take advantage of, and they're a
Mhm.
lot more affordable than a lot of times what we realize. What I find a lot of times that keeps sometimes our people from going to seek advice is that we think we can't afford it. And
Mm-hmm.
then we sit down and you realize, oh, for what I've been maybe paying for my cell phone bill for a year, or my cable, or whatever other luxuries that I enjoy, I could have had a good financial plan and estate plan done. So
Mhm.
sometimes it's just a matter of prioritizing what's most important and making a decision to say, I'm going to do this.
Yep.
I had,
Exactly.
uh, Maurice, how do we decide how much we need for retirement?
A lot of that is coming from working with a financial planner,
Mm-hmm.
because there are a lot of calculators out there that you can get from your 401k where they'll say, well, based on what you're saving, here's how much you'll need. But
Mm-hmm.
when you're working with an individual financial planner, they're going to help you understand, well, how do you factor that number in? You have to look at how much money you're making now. How much money are you putting away? How much are you spending today? And then what are going to be your sources of income now? Generally speaking, we would historically estimate that the cost of living goes up by 3% a year. We talk about inflation,
Mm-hmm.
but if you talk to any retiree, they'll tell you their groceries and their medical expenses have gone up way more than 3%. So, really, figuring out your number comes down to working with somebody who can help you understand what's relevant for your individual situation.
And for any of our viewers to get in touch with either one of you, can you give us your social media not status, but your names in social media and any other ways they can get in touch with you?
Sure, sure. I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm
Spell
on
your name.
Instagram. It's Lenore Grantham, and Lenore is Lanore. It's not the common spelling, but that's the spelling. And Grantham is Grantham. If you put me in any Google site, it'll come up. So
Okay, Maurice.
And for myself, you can, like Lenore said, you can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, as well as Instagram. You can do Maurice Miller Jr. Our business is Millers with an S, because it's my wife and I, WMG.com, which is Millers Wealth Management Group.com. And you can look us up, and all of our contact information is there.
Okay, wonderful.
That is wonderful. I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you, Lenore, and thank you, Maurice, for coming today to join us on Centrally Speaking to talk to us about this very, very important information that we all need to really. Hopefully, some of you guys out there have been taking notes. Save this broadcast because it's really, really important. We are definitely coming up to retirement age. And I know right now that, hey, I need to work a little bit longer because I need to get that nest egg going better, get it, grow it, because I want to live a certain kind of way when I retire. I don't want to have to, you know, when you think about the way that you live, do you want to continue comfortably in the status that you are, or do you want to have to go down a little bit? And me personally, I'm a little high maintenance. I can't do that.
I want to live a little better than I do right now. So I know I got
Because my husband received the Social Security letter a couple of weeks ago that told us how much he had made from his first job back in 1980 to today, and it let me know that we need to really look into what we're doing and what we've been investing in, because come when he turns, he says he wants to retire at 62, because he had cancer and everything. So he's really ready to shut it down, and he wants to enjoy his life, our life together. So this is really timely information, because it gives me the tools to be able to navigate that and to begin to really have that conversation and figure out how I want my retirement to be. Figure out who I want to designate, or who we want to designate to handle certain things when we transition or move on. And so I just want to really thank you guys. This is some really helpful information. Very helpful.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing all the information that you guys have. Thank you for sharing how we can get in touch with you. I know we're going to be in touch. Tracy and I feel very confidently we'll be getting in touch with you both.
Exactly.
I know I need it. But yeah, again, thank you so very much. And it's a pleasure to have you on and spreading the word about how we can build that generational wealth and get that conversation or those conversations started about estate planning and financial literacy. So thank you very much. I want to go ahead and do the disclaimer again. Is that okay, Tracy?
Yes, you can. Yes, that's fine.
Okay. And did you guys have anything you wanted to say before I continue?
I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me on. I enjoyed this conversation, and just thank you for giving us the opportunity to share this knowledge.
Excellent.
And I appreciate you having us on. And I just want to make one final point. The key to our community to fight all of these things that we're fighting is we just need to invest more money. We are the most underinvested community there is. So a lot of times it's not a matter of us picking the right investment. It's just putting more money into investments, because at the end of the day, regardless of somebody's ethnicity, if I have 100 shares of Apple and they have 100 shares of Apple, we are equal. That's how we fight systemic racism, is through our dollars. So thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor.
Wonderful. So again, the information shared in this podcast is for educational purposes only. It's not legal, financial, or tax advice. Everyone's situation is different, so be sure to talk to a qualified professional before making decisions about retirement or estate planning. The views shared here are those of the guests and the host, and not necessarily those of the Detroit Central High School class of 1985, baby, reunion committee. Thank you again for watching. Centrally Speaking, we are out.
Save the date for our 40th reunion, held June 19th through June 22nd, 2025. For more details, visit our website at dchsreunion.com or visit our Facebook page at DCHS Reunion. Attention class of 85, the registration for our 40th class reunion has been extended. Hurry, 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 and get your spot. Don't delay. Register today.